Good morning, everybody. It is day 22 of spiritual healthcare. Yeah, hopefully everybody is doing really well on this amazing Easter weekend. We'll wait for some people to log in here and we'll get going. Today we're going to be talking a lot about our minds and our ability to focus on what we want. We're going to be focusing on sort of the correct use of imagination, I guess, is a great way to put it. And that actually comes from one of the questions today. How do we utilize our focus to the best ability, our best ability to really push forward, to create what we want, and to understand, I think, the cause and effect of where we are in terms of our state of being and what's currently being reflected in our environment, compared to what's going on. Good morning, Shadow. Good morning, Jay. It's good to see you guys. Today is going to be really, really great. I've got a really cool thing as well for you guys to check out later, which is super fun. And it is literally just that. It's just super fun. So, good morning, Dan. Good morning, Patricia. So today we're going to talk a lot about that, a lot about what do we do with the imagination power that we have? Where can we focus? What can we do to create more of what we want? Whether you're dealing with a haunting that you're not, thrilled about, or, you're just looking at the reality around you right now and realizing all this stuff is kind of bubbling up to the surface. So we're going to talk a lot about that. As I say, two really great questions we're going to tackle today, because both of them are big subjects, which is kind of exciting for me. So your questions, everybody, have been fantastic. Please don't stop sending them in. I love them. I've got like a stockpile now, so I'm like I'm going through them like day by day, and I love it. So as I say, if you don't hear an answer to your question today, then I will get to it tomorrow or the next day or whichever. On Monday, we've got a really, really cool show that we're going to do. I got a great message from a regular watcher of the show, and we're going to talk about grief and the grief process, and how we use these tools and implement it towards that, because grief can come in a number of different ways, right? And so we're going to talk about that. And we'll go through that on Monday. Hello, Mark. How are you doing? Des? So I want to get like right into it. We've got people logging on now, which is fantastic. And one of the this is a really, really cool question. This question came from Jan. And I thought this was brilliant. So she's asking, you had a post on your page about great things are preceded by chaos. This one speaks quite loudly to me. I've been living in chaos for about 8 years. Could you speak about this? Good morning, Dawn. Good morning, Pat. So I love this question, because this really digs into the heart of some of the things that we've been talking about, some of the things that we've been working on in journaling and things like that. So great things being preceded by chaos. And so here's the thing, when we are deciding on what it is that we want, oftentimes the status quo is either not good, it's not good enough, or it's just simply not the thing that we're happy with. Except people tend to get into ruts, okay? So when I'm dealing with clients, I see this all the time. Good morning, April. I see this constantly, and oftentimes our ruts and our behavior patterns and what we do become really, really comfortable, and oftentimes, especially if they're dysfunctional. Good morning, Jan. I'm actually answering one of your questions right now. So when we get into this habit of being dysfunctional, even if the dysfunction is not making us happy, getting out of that and getting out of that constant pattern of behavior is really, really difficult, because sometimes what we don't know and what we think is coming can be more frightening than just staying in the trauma. Now, it's never a good idea to stay in the trauma, because you will always be sicker there than you will be moving forward, even if that motion forward seems to be daunting or anything like that. And as I say, I see this with clients very, very frequently, because what happens is we'll go in, we'll talk to them about how the haunting is mirroring the dysfunction that's going on with their family, what's going on with unhealed hurts and stuff like that. And then it's up to them to be able to turn around and start to heal that. So as I said numerous times before, we can be the compass, we're not the solution. The client is always the solution. But in order to push forward with that change, when we start to want the next thing, when we start to want the healing, when we start to ask for that healing, oftentimes what will happen is that things will seem like they're just blowing up on us, right? Stuff starts to happen. We've got, whether it be in the paranormal activity or whether it be in our lives, we get weird reactions from people. Sometimes people see their finances tank. They see all sorts of just crazy stuff happens, which sometimes looks like bad luck. But usually what's happening when we're in that healing process and things seem like they're just becoming very chaotic, it's often because we've got a very strong dysfunctional pattern going on. And when we start to acknowledge that dysfunction and we start to actually, pour some love on it, then what ends up happening is, we start to activate it a little bit. It doesn't mean we can't clean it up. We absolutely can. And we have to be able to work and move through that. So that chaos that we see when we're healing or trying to, as I say, work through a trauma or anything like that, sometimes it comes out in a haunting. It comes out in or like a negative haunting. We'll see that the activity escalate sometimes before it gets better. It's like that in life as well. So yeah, chaos really does precede great change. It really does. And it's not always a bad thing. But sometimes what happens is that we end up, going forward just that little bit. We kind of work our way through just that little bit. We start to see the chaos and we go, oh man, this isn't worth it. I'm backing out. And it's not the time to back out. All of what's happening is the universe is showing you exactly where things need to be cleaned up. Okay, so if you've got that toxic person in your life, then chances are, if once you start to heal, that toxic person is going to rear their ugly heads. Almost guaranteed. Same thing, as I say, it works with negative hauntings. You start to heal, sometimes it starts to rear its ugly head a little bit. And when we get into, as a dealing with, Jan was mentioning a relationship that she had that is also a part of that, then yeah, sometimes unfortunately, it's our partners that rear their ugly heads about stuff as well, which is never a good sign. Some people can't and will not be able to keep up with who you are and where you're going. They just won't. And that's okay. They can stay where they are. That's all right. But you can't be dragging them along either. So I know, Jan, you were asking about a husband. Hello, Allison. Hello, Ken. And we can't be dragging them along either. So Jan, you were mentioning a lot of your chaos is the largest part of your chaos is now being caused by an ex. I think a lot of people have been in that boat or are currently in that boat. And I think when we're dealing with something like, an ex that you have to keep in touch with or something like that due to, custody or anything like that, it's a matter of being able to, number one, set your boundaries. Hauntings are exactly the same way. We have to be able to set our boundaries, and not only with them, not only being clear verbally with them, but being clear verbally with ourselves as well. Are you honoring yourself and the boundaries that you're setting? That's the damn thing, is that people oftentimes don't honor the promises or the boundaries that they set for themselves, and then we get upset and we get disappointed that they aren't being followed or they aren't being met. So we have to be very careful that we're not the cause of our own chaos. And if we're the ones, are we the ones that are disappointing ourselves? Are we the ones that just aren't following through on the promises that we're keeping for ourselves? Are we being are we keeping our integrity? Are we looking at, we talked yesterday about online communities, right? And the negativity sometimes that we're seeing in online communities, whether it be paranormal or political or anything like that. And at what point are you allowing that energy to kind of enter your space? When you're dealing with things like, I tell my clients often with negative hauntings, when we're dealing with something like that, you address the behavior in the moment, but once you've addressed that behavior, let it go. Just let it go. Just let it go. Don't bring that with you. So if you have to deal with somebody that is in that negative headspace, keep your boundaries. Make sure you're really clear about what you're going to allow, what you're not going to allow, and know when to disconnect from it. So there's a couple of different kinds of chaos that can be happening, and once we kind of identify where that chaos is originating from, and it's almost always ourselves. It really is. What we're getting back is always a mirror of something going on. It's always a lesson. There's always a lesson in there. And once we start to understand that, we can start to work through it and understand that the healing that's going to come from it is going to be incredible. It's going to be better than what you had, almost guaranteed. The universe is like that. It will deliver back to you so much more than you can possibly imagine. It's just crazy. I had an experience just in the last couple of years that has been like that. I had a person in my life who was just horrible and was sabotaging what I was doing, was sabotaging my work, was being harassing my family, all sorts of crazy stuff. And what's interesting was that as soon as I put that boundary up, as soon as I just put up that barrier, and the barrier was with me because he wouldn't listen at all. He had no interest in listening. I would tell him, to go piss off, and he would literally laugh. So the boundary was not with him. I said, you can do exactly what you want to do, but here's what I'm going to do. So you can go behave this way. You can go do what you need to do. That's fine. But here's my expectations. Here's where my line is drawn, and I'm going to enforce it. So things, as I say, I ended up, for me personally, just not speaking to him. I would get a harassing message or a text message or something like that, and I would just not reply. I'm like, no, you don't get to behave this way in my space. So as I say, whether you're dealing with a haunting or whether you're dealing with, a living person or anything like that, it's still the same. You've got to hold that sense of integrity for you and just be able to turn around and say, no, we're not doing this. And I love myself enough to not be willing to let you occupy space in my head either. I love myself enough to choose my thoughts. And that actually is going to be leading us into the next question. And the next question comes from Christopher, from our online group, Entity Seekers, Ghost Enthusiasts. And I love his question. He asks, the correct use of one's imagination away from resentment, anger, and fear. And he wants to know basically about that. What is the correct use of one's imagination? So I love this question because it's exactly what we're talking about right now. The idea that at what point are we allowing those thoughts to really break our own hearts? We have a tendency to do that. I know you guys can probably relate to this. You're standing, in the shower or something like that, and you've got an argument going in your head with somebody who you want to have that argument with or something like that. And, and you find yourself slowly starting to tank emotionally as you're imagining what they're saying and what they're saying to you and all of that kind of thing. So we have to be disciplined enough to just not allow for this stuff. We can't allow ourselves to break our own hearts. And when we start talking about, as I say, the correct use, as he's using, the correct use of one's imagination, which I think is a little bit rigid because I don't think there's a right or wrong. But I think, the idea that we have to remember that what we are putting in, what we are creating in our minds is really that first step to seeing that stuff manifest around us in a myriad of different ways. So we've got to really be thinking about, okay, wait a minute. If I'm experiencing this emotion, if I'm emotionally attached to the thoughts that are going on in my head, what am I projecting? Because at that point, if we're getting back what we're thinking about, then we can't really get angry at the other person per se, for turning around and reflecting back to us, the energy that we're putting out there. Because sometimes that's what we're going to get. It's interesting because when we go into haunted locations and things like that, some interesting results will happen in regards to this, because you can have a group of people that will come into a place who are, expecting hauntings to be negative or bad or scary, or, they've heard rumors that, I don't know, places like cursed or something like that. And so they go in, right, with an expectation. They have already set it up in their minds what that looks like. And they walk in, and all of a sudden the things that they're starting to experience or live with mirrors back to them the fact that, all hauntings are, whatever their belief is, all hauntings are evil, or something like that. And they start to get back exactly what they're expecting. That's why it gets so frustrating when you've got somebody who is just a complete skeptic. I don't believe in this stuff, nothing. And, they go in and they can live in the same place and there's nothing, because that's kind of where their state of expectation is. So it can get a little bit frustrating. So we have to start looking at what it is that we're actually wanting out of these interactions. And yesterday we spoke about things like political unrest and things like that online. And that's kind of the same thing. We want to hate on the thing that is, to us blatantly wrong. But unfortunately, the problem is, as soon as we start hating on it or fearing it, we're putting that emotional energy back in, and bam, we start to get more of it. And it confirms what's in our head, and that becomes a problem as well. Shadow's got a great question. She's been reading that trauma is stored in DNA. There is a strong base in science about this right now that they're studying, and it's very, very fascinating. It's called epigenetics, and I can find a link for you guys if you want. And it's the idea that our trauma from, say, for example, a past generation, or say, for example, in the First Nations people or African American people and things like that, where there's been such large instances of just generational problems that they kind of get rooted within the DNA and it gets passed down. Very interesting. And so epigenetics, you guys, I'll find a link to that, and so you guys can read about it. It's really, really interesting. My thoughts about it, I think it's definitely something that plays a role. It's definitely something that we have to look at. But I also think that we ultimately have the control, over how we're going to shape our current experience. So we don't want to let something like that, like a generational trauma or anything like that, to allow us to sit on the sidelines of life, and say, well, I had, my ancestors had this happen, so therefore this is the problem I'm in now. I think it's really important to acknowledge where that's come from, acknowledge where that trauma can come from, but now take it as an acknowledgement that you can heal whatever's there. Be the one to break that cycle. Take that into account, but don't let it define your thoughts, your imagination, your perspective going forward. It's one thing to be able to own a part of your story, which is really important. Own your story, but you can own your story without sitting or being in or becoming a part of what that story used to be. You have the opportunity to redefine it now, which is something, as I say, I find that clients sometimes have a hard time with. They've gone all their lives, for example, experiencing negative hauntings and things like that, and well, my family's just cursed, or my family's just stuck with this is the way it is, or whatever, and that's just simply not the case. Use it as a learning tool, but don't get stuck in your story, which is really important. And Shadow says, we don't want it to stop us. We want to acknowledge and heal it. Totally, absolutely. It is just so key that we kind of move forward, and when we're dealing with something like COVID-19 and things like that, when we start to emerge from this, when the lockdowns are lifted and things like that, it's going to be so important for all of us to be able to bring ourselves into the present moment and not stay stuck in any sort of trauma or story that this allowed for, or that we kind of got ourselves into because of this. There's going to be a lot of hesitation, there's going to be a lot of fear, and it's important that we acknowledge where we're at so that we can kind of move through that and get to those better feeling places about it, which is why I think things like the journaling work and things like that are just so important. So I want to give you guys a cool process that's been around for years, just years. But I think it's so prevalent now, and it's something that we can all do, and I've been doing actually on Pinterest, because Pinterest is just, anybody who is on Pinterest, oh my God, it's a rabbit hole. Everybody knows you get on Pinterest and you are not on there for 5 minutes. You are on there for at least an hour. Like, that's just the way it is. But, you know, we get all these images. For those of you guys who don't have a Pinterest account, it's really fun. It's basically like, it's like you get all these images and you can create all these photo albums based on the things that you search for. It's like a giant Google Images, but just better. And you can pin your images to different boards, they call them. But one thing that you guys can do and start doing with the great rabbit hole that is Pinterest is start yourselves a vision board. You know, we often think of vision boards having to be, you know, paper and pen and things like that. And I mean, they can be, you know, you can still cut stuff out of magazines and all of that type of thing. But Pinterest is so great for vision boards. You can turn around and, you know, start 2 or 3 of them if you want. It doesn't have to be just one. But this is such a great way, and I love this, of being able to see the thing, whatever it is that you're looking for, whether it be, you know, maybe it's a new house that you're looking to build. I've got a friend right now who wants to, she wants to build her own house. You know, she's really into decor and things like that. So she's been doing all of this decor stuff and pinning it up. You know, whether you're drawing and you're looking for inspiration, or you're, you know, whatever it is for you, then grab onto Pinterest, because when you start to create that vision board, you can go back on it over and over and over again and see it in your, it's more than seeing it in your mind's eye. You can see all the details, you know, in the pictures, and choose kind of, well, I want this, but I don't want that, you know, or this would be nice, or I could see myself here, and try it out, because it's a great way to spend your time. You're then focusing, as you're scrolling through all these pictures, you're focusing on the things that you want and refining those details. You know, you're getting happy about what's in there. It's a great way to go up the emotional scale, especially if you're feeling down, because there's like a million cute animal pictures on there too. Which is great. I love snakes. I love them because I have one and he's amazing. So I have a whole board of like really adorable snake faces, and that just makes me super happy. Yes, and Dawn is saying, please look up Edgar Cayce. Yes, I know Edgar Cayce well. He is, those sessions are great. There's a ton of channeling sessions on there, and they're fantastic. He is really good. So try it. Try a vision board. See what you can put on there today. Pick a subject, you know, something that you've been wanting for a while, or a trip you've been wanting, or something like that. Something that's going to pull you into that good space. And check out Pinterest and try it out. So I've got a really great reading for us today that is super applicable. I know some of you guys have went out and got Faith in the Valley by Ian Van Zandt, which is awesome. I think that is so cool. I'm glad you guys are benefiting from that. And Shadow says she wants to see the snake. I will, one of these days, I will bring him to class. But here is Galen. Here is Galen. He sits on my desk. He has a picture on my desk. But he is asleep in the mornings. Yeah, he's normally nocturnal, so he wakes up in the late evenings, usually like 7, 8 o'clock or so, and then he runs me ragged for like 3 hours. He's so excited. It's spring. It's warming up, and he knows. So, okay, so check this out. Sometimes it's got to be worse before it gets better. Sometimes it's not until the muck and mire are so deep, so thick, that we realize that there has got to be change. As long as we have little problems, we are willing and able to maneuver our way around. When the challenges are small, we can find a quick fix, a means of deliverance, without realizing there is a deeper problem, a bigger issue which requires healing. Healing is not like fixing. Fixing is doing whatever we can to cover up, disguise, or eliminate the problem, temporarily. Healing cuts to the core, goes to the bone, as a means of eliminating the cause of the problem, forever. Band-aids fix. They cover up the problem, keep it clean and out of sight. When something is healing, it will ooze, cause pressure or hurt. Stitches will fix, close up the problem, and make it bearable. If, however, there's an infection under the stitches, the wound must be opened, the infection must be cleaned out before there is any relief. Healing is a great deal more painful than fixing, but think of it this way. Once there is a healing, the problem goes away for good. And it is so absolutely true. And as I say, it is so relevant to what we've talked about today, which is there is chaos before change. But what looks like chaos, and I want you guys to remember that as well. What looks like chaos is a healing. It is really under. There is some sort of control there. But the problem is our brains, our human minds, can't always wrap ourselves around that. We really can't. We see such a small piece of the greater whole and the greater picture. And what I have found is that what often looks like chaos ends up protecting us from something that we simply can't see. I can't count the amount of times I have looked back on my life and this one individual that I mentioned earlier, this was a good example of that, where I couldn't understand what the hell was going on at that point. I look back and what I have heard about, what's going on with him, and where I am in my life now, it was hands down the best thing that could have possibly happened. So it's hard to see it in the moment because, as I say, remember, we're only getting little piece of the greater picture. And when we keep that in mind, we can sit and be still in the chaos and watch the pieces fall, because I guarantee you on the other side of it, there is something more. There is something that that you are being either guided to or led to in a way that is just, you probably wouldn't have done had this not happened. So it's something to really keep in mind. Now, everybody, our health affirmations, because we got to go into our day with our health affirmations. Everyone take a breath. It is natural for my body to be well. Even if I don't know what to do in order to get better, my body does. I have trillions of cells with individual consciousness, and they know how to achieve their individual balance. When this condition began, I didn't know what I know now. I don't need to understand the cause of this illness. I only have to gently, eventually release this illness. It doesn't matter how it got started because it's reversing its course right now. And there's no hurry about any of this. My body knows what to do, and well-being is natural to me. My inner being is intricately aware of my physical body. My cells are asking for what they need in order to thrive, and Source is answering those requests. I'm in very good hands. My only work is to relax and breathe, and I can do that easily. Everybody take a breath. Thank you guys for another wonderful morning of spiritual healthcare. We've got some really cool things coming up, as I say, in the next couple of days. Monday's show is going to be really cool. As I say, we're going to talk about grief and that process and what it looks like for all of us to, move through all of this in different ways. So, for example, it's not only about, say, losing a loved one. It's about losing a job, losing a way of life, losing, there's so many things that are going to need to be processed. So we're going to talk about that on Monday. Tomorrow we've got some really, really really good questions yet again, because you guys are amazing sending this stuff in. So keep sending the questions in. As I say, I'm keeping a list. Mark wants to know if I'm having a Sunday show. Absolutely. We will be doing this every single day, all weekend. So Sunday will definitely be happening. Tomorrow, I'm wearing my rabbit ears tomorrow. So you guys have to come to that because I'm wearing my rabbit ears. Yeah. So if you have rabbit ears, put your rabbit ears on. So yeah, tomorrow's going to be great. I will see you guys back here tomorrow morning, spiritual healthcare at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. If you guys want to back up again on all the classes and things like that, they are all on youtube.com/entityseeker as well as entityseeker.ca. So and that's my official site. If you go to the media video page, there's all of the spiritual healthcare classes are on there. You can scroll through them and there's links to everything there as well, so it's great. I will be putting a link up to epigenics and stuff like that online. I also wanted to give you guys a little to-do, which I just about forgot about. So this is really fun and it's short and it's really cool. So they have decided, or on YouTube, I discovered how, if any of you guys have ever been to Disneyland or have ever wanted to go to Disneyland, they have put on a video of the Haunted Mansion ride that you can actually just go through. And what I love about this, what I love about the Haunted Mansion, was just the effects, it took me a bit to figure out how they do it. I now use these effects in my shows, my live shows and things like that. Yeah, it's so cool. So I'm going to throw a link to that on Entity Seeker, so you guys can check it out, because it's just so much fun. And I went on that ride when I was about 10, and I thought it was just the coolest thing. So you guys can check that out. And now it's on YouTube, which I think is super cool. So anyway, have a great Saturday, you guys. I will see you tomorrow, spiritual healthcare, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Have a great day, everybody.